The Atomic Agents framework is designed around the concept of being extremely lightweight and modular. So like each component that you typically have with an AI application, the agent, tool, or even context provider, think of them like Lego blocks. Each one serves a single purpose, and you want to do that one thing very well, and they can be reusable so they can be used for other pipelines. So let's just get right into it. So the first thing we need to do is pip install Atomic Agents. It took me a second because I've already been playing around with it. So let's go over our first example. This is how a basic agent works. Now, I want you to know that this framework is built around Instructor and Pedantic. So if you're really familiar with the Pedantic, that means that all of the input and output is going to be basically using classes in the way that Pedantic does it, okay? Which should be very familiar with you, which should be, if you're using Python, you should understand how Pedantic works. Okay, so we have some inputs, or we have some imports. So Atomic Agents here, we have the actual Atomic Agent, a config, a base schema, which we will go over, and then we have a system prompt generator and chat history. So first off, this is going to be a sentiment analyzer agent. So we have a sentiment input, which takes the class of schema, and we just have one property text. Okay, so these two are Pedantic classes, essentially. So we have another output. So this is what we want to be output. We want the sentiment, the confidence, and the reasoning behind why it thinks it's that way. So now we have the system prompt generator. Okay, so we have a background, steps, and output instructions. Okay, so the background, like you've seen, this is just kind of how we want to describe this agent. And then the steps. Okay, so we want you to read carefully, identify everything, assess, and then provide the brief reasoning for your conclusion. And then we have the output instructions, and these are going to use the classes that we've defined. So now down here, we can say client equals instructor from OpenAI. Okay, so now we're just kind of starting to configure the agent. We first wanted to just use the OpenAI client, essentially. And so that means you're going to have a .env file with OpenAI API key in it. Now, to initialize the agent, we say Atomic Agent. We pass in the input and the output schema, so it knows it has a structured way of what it should be input to the agent, and then it's going to give you a structure for the output. And then we just define the model and the system prompt and the history if we have chat history. Now, when we go to start this, I basically have three different texts that I wanted to analyze. For each one, the input data is going to be passed into the input class. This is a little different. So the sentiment input class up here has one property text. So we're basically going to be creating an input class with the first text. I absolutely love this product, exceeded all my expectations. Then we're going to run the result with that input, and then it should give us an output, and we're going to do that for all three of those texts. So let's go ahead and run this example. Okay, so the first test is I absolutely love this product, exceeded all my expectations. Of course, that is a positive sentiment, has a confidence level of that, and then gives the reason. Second one talks about the worst experience. Obviously, that's negative, and it has a confidence for that. Okay, and the third one is neutral. Okay, so we have structured output, and we gave it a specific input, which is basically just text. So it took that, gave it to the agent, and then made the AI call based on the instructions, and then now we got specific output. Okay, great. So you just made your basic agent that you need to know how to create or use, or to create agents with Atomic Agents framework. Now I want to get into something that's going to be a little bit more complex, and this is dealing with tools and context providers. Okay, so the first thing is this works a little bit differently. You know, typically you would just have a tool, you just pass it into an agent, and then if it needs to use the tool based off the prompt or the instructions that's given, then it will decide if it needs to or not. It works a little bit differently here. Okay, so first off, we're going to have a custom calculator tool right here. It says calculator tool. We're going to define the input and the output for it. The input and the output. Again, these are Pedantic classes. You're going to see a lot of Pedantic here. Okay, and that's a good thing. So here the input for the calculator is the expression, right? 2 plus 2, 5 times 5, 0 plus 1. And then we have the output. So basically the result. And then we don't worry about the config for now, but we'll be passing it into the calculator tool. Is going to have a run function where we're just going to basically evaluate that expression using a built-in Python library. Okay, so now here's where we're going to get something that's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to have a calculator provider based off of a base context provider. Now with this, we want this to basically give us a response or an output. So we're going to be using the calculator tool output. Okay, so that's for the tool. Now for the agent, so this is all going to come together. We're going to have an input and output schema. And then we have our system prompt generator where we give it the steps, the background, and kind of the instructions we want, how we want this agent to run. Okay, so now we have a calculator tool. We say client instructor.from OpenAI. Again, we're using OpenAI. And then we create our math agent. So now how this works is we have two different problems. What is 15 multiplied by 27? And then this is kind of the expression that we're giving. Okay, so then this is another question and an expression. So what we're doing is we're going to be iterating over both those problems. So for each problem, we are going to be running the calculator tool first. So we have the input, and then we are going to basically be running the calculator tool. So now this calculator provider is the result of that tool being ran, and we're passing that into the math agent by registering a context provider. And then we're basically saying, okay, the agent is going to have a math agent input schema where the question is going to be the problem question. And then we're going to run it. Now, I know that may not have made a little bit of sense. So let's just go ahead and run this so we can see how it looks. Okay, so the first question, so we had two questions, right? The first one is, what is 15 multiplied by 27? The calculator computed 15 times 27 equals 405.0. Okay, so we passed in this first set, this question and expression. We passed that in here. So the expression was here, passed to the calculator input. We ran the calculator tool. The result is right here. So the result, calculator result was here, but calculator computed, and this gave us that actual result. So our calculator computed 15 times 27 equals 405. Now we're going to be taking that calculator provider, okay, provider context. We're going to be giving that to the math agent. So now the math agent is basically going to take and run with that. And also it's going to run with the agent input, which was the actual question. So the question was, what is 15 multiplied by 27? Okay, so the agent answer is 405, and we could do more with this. But then if the answer that expression used, so if we basically use that expression, it's just going to print out that we used that. Okay, we did for both of them. So basically, we had the tool run, and then the result of that tool was going to be passed in as a math input for the agent, right? So then we could do something. So if you were doing a web search, you could do a bunch of web searching to get the results of that. Then you'll pass that into the actual agent to do something with that research. Now, what if we wanted to chain things together, right? We have this, but then we just easily wanted to take the output from this query agent and send it to something else. Okay, well, that's easy. It's easy to chain these things because they're modular, right? That means like they're kind of separated from each other. You can just take something from one and it can be used as input for another agent. Okay, so what we have here is, say we want to do a web search. We have the basic input schema. It's a little bit simpler example. It just takes an instruction and number of queries. So we want to search for anything online, and we want to do maybe up to 5 queries. And then we pass that in here. We have the query agent. We have the config. So we want to use OpenAI as the provider. We have the model, and then we have our background steps and output instructions. Okay, great. So this is going to give us some output. Okay, but now what if all of a sudden that output we just want to pass in, to as context to another agent? Well, we can basically just import another search tool. We take the queries, this query right here, we take the config, and we take the output schema. So the output schema basically the output from this agent. So by configuring the output of this query agent, that can then be used as the input for another tool. So we can chain these things together. Now on their GitHub, they have plenty of examples for you to look at. They even have MCP, orchestration, RAG chatbot. There are lots of examples here that I highly recommend that you come in here and look at. This framework may be a little bit different on how you develop AI agents from this, like based on maybe other ones that you have used, or maybe not, For me personally, it was a little different. I haven't used this as much, but I think after kind of using this, then I can definitely see how you would want to use this in production, right? I think that this is a great framework. I think a lot of frameworks are great. I have some that I don't prefer as much, but I will say after trying this out and using it, I do recommend that you at least give this a try. Get on their GitHub, give them a star, and then let me know what you think about them in the comments below. And all this will be in my GitHub and in my free school community. Here are some more courses for you to watch now.